thought I'd give a bit of a different view today, and I want to talk about the here and now and where generative AI really is. So we obviously see a lot of news about students achieving on exams with ChatGPT. ChatGPT gets a lot of the notoriety, but I think we're really underestimating the power of what's actually happening with these foundation models and why it's so important that as a community, as a country, as a region, we take control of this. Because I love Nazir's comment about being the first in these things. And I think that's really important because alignment is probably the number one issue that we're seeing at the moment. But before I go into the future, I think it's very important to sort of look back and go back into a time machine and see where we were in the dim dark years of 2018. In 2018, this was our most challenging AI problem, telling the difference between a blueberry muffin and a chihuahua dog. Now that's only 5 short years ago. And if you think of where we are now, 2 examples that I think are quite poignant. I'm a bit of a sustainability nerd and I love my solar power and I love making sure I'm optimizing it in my house. So I gave ChatGPT a simple problem. I gave it an unstructured data file of all of the output of my inverters, completely unlabeled. It was able to not only understand what that input was, write the Python code, execute the Python code, visually interpret the graphs that you can see there, and then give me an interpretation as to predicting what days my panels must have been cleaned and what's the right frequency to be able to do this. Now, why is this important? If you think of what ChatGPT is, it is autocomplete on steroids. If you actually fundamentally think about what a large language model is, it's statistically predicting what the next word should be. But now we've got it writing its own code, being multimodal and visually interpreting graph results, and being able to understand something from completely unstructured data, the understanding of the data, and interpreting that in a mean way. If we look at this other example, I don't know if this is a joke, but it's certainly very funny. This is an example from Bing, where Bing proceeds to be able to very easily break CAPTCHA, which, let's be honest, is protecting half of the internet, and tell me in the same paragraph that, by the way, I can't break CAPTCHA. These are what we call emergent skills or within these large language models. And what you can see is that what's becoming really interesting is not the large language models, but the emergent skills that these AGI foundation models are starting to be able to detect and build without that being the original goal. The original goal of these large language models, when we wrote that, when the Transformer paper was originally written, wasn't to be able to discover truth by using coding models and being able to learn how to code to be able to get that single source of truth, the true underlying facts of the physical world. So when you think about it, why is this really important? If you actually think of how we interact with the real world, vision and language are the 2 ways we actually interact with the real world. So once we're able to start to solve reliably, simply, and predictably, being able to classify and segment our visual cortex and our language model, we now have the ability to give these models one thing they were always missing, and we've talked about today many times, is the underlying data to be able to learn and train new models. And IDC has done some expectations on this, where they sort of see 60% of all data being created at the edge through the manipulation of these AGI foundation models. And it kind of, I think the other thing to pause and think about, and once I press play, I'm worried there'll be music, so let me just talk first, is it's gone so far now where generative AI is able to actually give us physical world playgrounds. So it made a lot of news. Tesla just bought 30,000 GPUs to do all of their self-training for their neural networks in virtual sandpits like this. So now this overcomes the other big problem that was brought up multiple days, is, we need a lot of data. Well, now we can actually synthesize the data, make the real world in a safe environment, and then be able to train these models, and then we only go through that test and validation phase versus having to do the training after capture of all of these things. And this video, this is all computer generated, right? So now we're seeing the merging of generative AI and the visual game text space to be able to build all of these visualizations physically accurate. how do I build that physical world physically accurate so my models can be trained virtually and be able to be reliable once they're released on the real world. Again, all of this is animated. So it's really come a long way since when we used to play on Unreal Engine or watch the first Lord of the Rings movies. Now that's the exciting part. And I think coming back to what's the real issue at stake. It's not bias in data. The real issue we're seeing is what we call alignment, right? So if you actually look under the hood, and sometimes you get a glimpse of it when you're working with ChatGPT or when you're working with something like Llama, the actual model holds truth. It's the alignments and the safeguards they put around the model is where the problems start to become. And a good example is the big use case got taken away within a day. ChatGPT being allowed you to actually get real truth by sourcing the actual web content got taken away. Good examples of ChatGPT's accuracy getting worse as they put more and more safeguards to align to one particular culture's definition of appropriate behavior. So I think it can all be culminated with, well, we saw with Google's, the godfather of AI leaving Google, and his feedback was very simple. We're not going to get democratization of AI whilst we only have 2 or 3 companies that are controlling the source code and defining the alignment. And again, however many 221 countries, 230 countries, I guess, globally, we're not all going to have the same problem statements. We're not all going to have the same cultural values. But why should our AI models be aligned to 2 or 3 companies' view of it? Now, I know that's not, that's a bit gloomy. The good thing is there's always a silver lining. There's always a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And that, again, is open source, right? So what's really happened since February, March, is the open source community, some of that pioneered in the UAE with things like Falcon 40B and now 160B, is that open source is really grasping onto this, making these models available and not applying the alignment to restrict these capabilities. And that's the really important thing that's come out of the Sharjah technology part and the AHB capabilities, is this is now being further extended by being able to make available to startups, make available to entrepreneurs, this computing power, these capabilities to be able to build these next generation capabilities from these foundation models without having to suffer from the alignment problem. So what does that look like? So when we speak to customers, it's the typical buy versus build continuum we've seen in software development for many years. So some customers are going to have the in-house capabilities to build everything themselves. We're seeing a number of our customers augment their data science teams with people that understand large language models, the fundamental models, and building that internal capability. And then on the right-hand side, we have customers that say, this is not my core business. I have a problem statement. I need a partner to be able to help me be able to solve my problem statement. And this is where, of course, the democratization that we're seeing through this partnership that's being inaugurated today is really a first in the market and is really helping solve those problems that might not be solving self-driving cars, but are really important to this region and within this region. So what's Lenovo's part in all of this? So we really focus on 3 things. And on the left-hand side, when it comes to AI, one of the biggest and most important parts is sustainable AI. One of the ways the intelligence community is keeping an eye on who's building AGI is looking at the energy bill. Energy is the fundamental thing that we can track to look where big AGI projects are happening. And so for us, one of the ways that we're focusing is building the most energy efficient solutions. And a lot of that, again, is being shown here today with the use of liquid cooling and harnessing the waste energy. In the middle, obviously, at scale, managing these millions of models, being able to build a model, kill a model, retrain a model is really important. And Lenovo is investing in giving the software to be able to orchestrate and manage these clusters so that more time can be spent solving the problems, not managing the infrastructure. And then finally, it's very similarly aligned to AHB's goal, which is making sure that we get the smart, the rocket scientists, the PhD students, the domain experts that understand the knowledge and putting the tools in their hand and help them move from just not only doing a research project, but using Lenovo's global reach to turn that IP into products that then can be utilized all over the world, helping to put